focus on crime and the passing of a journalism giant. This is your Barbados Today Morning News Update for Monday, May 13, 2019. Thanks for joining us. I'm Carol Williams. Barbadians are again being told there's no need to panic. This time the advice is coming from an academic who has been researching the problem of crime plaguing Barbados and the region. Dr. Corinne Bailey is a senior research fellow at the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies, SALISIS, at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill. While he notes that the number of murders committed for the year are on track to surpass last year's 28, he says Barbados has traditionally experienced highs and lows with crime. And even as he acknowledged public concern, Dr. Bailey notes that the main problem in the country is property crime, particularly those involving residential burglary, criminal damage, and commercial burglary.
What places people, and by extension societies, communities, at risk for high crime? When we hear discussions about diminishing role of the church or disintegration of the family, moral decay, poverty, social exclusion, difficulty in reintegration, all of these are perceived risk factors for criminal activity. And so targeted intervention should be evidence-based, right? Using what we accept to be precipitous of crime. If not, there's no point. So the first thing I would say is let's not panic. Barbados has historically gone through highs and lows, but Barbados is going to have to come to a policy decision on A, what are those risk factors for crime, and B, whether or not the implementation of the targeting of these risk factors should form part of a holistic approach to crime prevention. And see what is the nature of the interaction between crime control and crime prevention. Because crime control is important, it's not to say it's not. But any country seeking to address crime has to make that policy commitment and stick to it and live with the results. If it doesn't work, then you rethink that policy.
Dr. Bailey was a panelist at a symposium on crime and violence at the Hilton Resort organized by SALISIS. Deputy Commissioner of Police Erwin Boyce, another panelist, says managing the fear of crime is a challenge for police at this time.
The geography of crime is concentrated in what we would call the Bridgetown area, the Bridgetown division. And again, when we look at the way crime is designed out of the Bridgetown area, we see that it is actually welcome within the Bridgetown area because you have districts that are, I don't want to use the word slum, but slumpish. But the fellas on the street will call them ghetto. And it has been, is it because there has been a neglect over the years of those districts? Is it because that the more educated, or the more prosperous person has been moving away from the district, and has been, as a result, there has not been that level of cohesion. There has been a new form of activities within those districts. So we realize that that has been the case. And what we are also realizing too is that it has now been shifted to some rural areas.
Director of the Criminal Research, Justice and Planning Unit, Cheryl Willoughby, says crime will soon be treated as a public health concern under a crime strategy that's being looked at.
Under the crime strategy, you will come to hear in the near future strategies that will treat crime as a public health concern, similar to HIV and AIDS, where primary, secondary, and tertiary crime prevention strategies will be outlined. And as I mentioned, these are currently being fleshed out by my department. There will also be included in that strategy recommendations for needs assessments among high-risk communities and high-risk families, and also to do needs assessments of students who have behavioral and other problems within the schools.
Some 24 people have been murdered for the year so far. The most recent occurred on Friday, when a 28-year-old man from Deacon's Farm, St. Michael, was shot while staying with a friend in Ruby Tenantry, St. Philip. On to other news, tributes continue to pour in following the death yesterday of veteran journalist and editor emeritus of the Nation newspaper, Harold Hoyte. He was 78. Prime Minister Mia Mottley is among those who've been remembering Hoyte, whom she described as a great patriot and a dear friend. She says the country has lost a prized son who has contributed more than his fair share to the development of post-independence Barbados.
In my eyes, Harold Hoyte was more than worthy to hold any and all offices in this land. He volunteered his time and intellect in ways too numerous to count. But for me, one of his seminal contributions was his service on the Commission on Law and Order established during my tenure as Attorney General. In addition, he did what so many have not done. He wrote our history, and I am so grateful that he did it for us and was able to share his perspective on his books before he left us. At a very personal level, my friendship with Harold became even closer in the last 10 or so years, where he was a pillar of strength for me and where I knew I could rely on both those virtues of which I just spoke, but also his utter discretion and his wise counsel. I shall miss him, as will many Barbadians, for his political and his editorial commentary. But above all, I shall miss him as a warm, generous, and committed human being.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
In the region, Cuba has announced it's rationing staple foods and hygiene products due to shortages, which it partly blames on the tightening of a trade embargo imposed by the U.S. We get the details from Al Jazeera.
The queue for fresh chicken stretches outside this supermarket in Havana. Poultry and many other items are often in short supply, and shoppers have just heard there's been a delivery. They'll have to wait several hours to be served. Not only that, there's now a limit on how much they can buy.
When we sell items such as chicken, sometimes there's not much available, so we've been told to limit the amount customers can buy.
Cuba imports up to 70% of its food and is struggling to pay the bills because the government's receiving less aid from Venezuela, which has its own crisis to deal with. Cuba's communist leaders are starting rationing meat, eggs, rice, beans and other essentials such as soap.
I think rationing is the only way to stop people hoarding food. People need to buy less so that everyone can get a little bit.
The government says the main reason for the food shortages is because of US sanctions. Donald Trump has reversed the thaw in relations when Barack Obama was president.
And finally, the U.S. and China appear deadlocked over trade negotiations. Washington is demanding promises of concrete changes to Chinese law, but Beijing says it won't swallow any bitter fruit that harms its interests. The trade war between the world's two top economies escalated on Friday, with the U.S. hiking tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods.
Donald Trump says the deal was close until the Chinese broke it. So in came new tariffs he believes will lead to a better deal.
I happen to think that tariffs for our country are very powerful. You know, we're the piggy bank that everybody steals from, including China.
The White House issued a statement from the president saying hiking tariffs from 10 to 25% on $250 billion worth of goods means China pays a lot more money directly into the US Treasury. But that's not how tariffs work. They will drive up prices on around 6,000 items America imports from China, from washing machines to steel, from footwear to fish. Importers pay the tariffs, the costs almost always passed on to the customer. Arnold Kaimler gets parts for his South Carolina bike shop from China. he's already added $20 to the cost of a new machine.
We don't know how we perceive that China is paying for this. We're paying for it, and it's being passed on to our customers.
One trade group says for a family of 4, they'll be paying $767 more a year because the increased costs tariffs bring.
And that's news, but for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook. And sign up for breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as Screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. You can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM. I'm Carol Williams. Have a good day.